Tonight on Free Minds TV, taxing bicycle riders to share the road with motorists. An anti-abortion group in Florida wants to make the pill illegal. Yeah, I guess that'll really help their cause. And distracted driving is now illegal in Maine. All that, the Downsizer Dispatch, and much, much more. Stay tuned. You are watching Free Minds TV. And welcome to a brand new edition of Free Minds TV. It is episode 127, and it is Toby here with you.
And Nick.
And this is the show where we challenge you, the viewer, to think outside the box. And I just wanted to say real quick that I want to thank all the great government officials, and that's what this show is really about, is highlighting the areas in all of our lives where government really allows us to function. Everything from being able to drive to work, to getting the food on our tables, to keeping us healthy and well, to spending money and helping out the economy. Everything that we do made possible by good old government. And that's what we have going on today. We are going to be highlighting stories from around the country and from around the world where the government is really just helping us all out, doing the things that make our lives possible. And we do have a lot of stories we're going to get to where the government is directly controlling things, where the elected officials are really doing what they do best to help us out. But first I wanted to start off with highlighting a story that Nick has about how people can really use the government to take away other people's rights. Because while the government is very useful in taking away our rights for us, individual people can also use the government to make sure that they take away their neighbors' rights. And that's what we wanted to start off with, going down to Florida, where one anti-abortion group actually wants to make it illegal to take the contraceptive birth control pill. Nick, you've got the latest.
Personhood Florida is an anti-abortion group that is pushing for an amendment to come up for a vote to be added to the Florida Constitution, which not only would define human life as beginning at conception and outlaw abortion, it would also outlaw the morning after pill and oral contraception, the birth control pill. Now, this amendment can become law if a certain number of people, over 600,000 people, submit signatures that are accepted to get this on the ballot in 2010, and then 60% of the electorate in Florida that go out to vote would have to vote in favor of this to, in fact, make it a new amendment to the Florida state constitution.
Now, this is a group of, I'm guessing, religious people who like the idea of keeping religious freedoms on the books, and I do too. I think that the government should be completely staying out of such things, but they want to travel into everybody else's lives, and it's not enough to say we won't take the pill ourselves. We want to go into other people's homes and make sure that they don't do what we believe is wrong. Now,
and it's not.
I just wanted to clarify real quick, because I know a lot of people are thinking this. Wouldn't banning the pill create more unwanted births, thus driving up the rate of abortions? Because we saw, the rate of unwanted pregnancies has declined significantly with the introduction of the pill. Wouldn't taking that option away from women not only be a violation on women's rights, but cause more abortions to take place?
Probably. I mean, we can only speculate, but I would think that that would be the case. I think that this group is coming from a very out there perspective that somehow the birth control pill, since it prevents an egg from being fertilized, is somehow morally equivalent to abortion. So preventing pregnancy is bad as well.
Well, doesn't abstinence actually prevent pregnancy as well? Because if you're being abstinent, you're not engaging in sex and you're not creating births. So should we just be advocating for everybody hump like bunnies, Nick?
I don't know. That's a very good point, Toby. I don't think they've thought about that.
One thing I like, the Catholic Church, for example, does think condoms are preventing babies from being born as well. So they're very much against condoms.
They are preventing pregnancies from taking place.
Unwanted babies, so you don't abort them. Anyways, one thing I like is they're at least not trying to make it illegal for us here in America. I know that the people out there are going to say, well, the Pope is trying to make it sure that we're not giving aid to countries by giving them condoms. It shouldn't prevent HIV. But at least here in America, there aren't actually people actively campaigning to make condoms illegal. They can respect that right. And the people who are really advocating this are very religious people. Now, they like their religious freedoms. Shouldn't they like the fact that protecting other people's rights? I don't care about religion. I'm agnostic, but I will fight to the tooth to make sure that you can keep your religious freedoms. I mean, it's only right that you can fight for my freedoms as well, or the freedoms for women to take the pill. If you don't care about your neighbor's freedoms, it's important to fight for it anyways, because soon your freedoms may be on the chopping block, the ones that you care about. That's why it's important for the neighbors to fight against all government intrusion into individual rights, not just the ones they care about. Because sooner enough, some group out there will be coming for yours. There are people out there that think that there are way too many religious freedoms. Look, I say the government should stay completely out, as they should stay completely out of your bedroom and what pill you take. Just my thoughts.
Yeah, and most likely this amendment is going to get shot down. The only place where this proposed amendment has actually made it onto the ballot was Colorado, and the voters shot it down, according to the article, by a 3-to-1 margin. So it's not widely supported.
But 3-to-1, that's actually quite a bit of votes that it got. 3-to-1 margin. There's a lot of people who think that individuals, one group has the right to take those rights away from others, and they don't. These are God-given rights. It's a woman's God-given right to decide what birth control she's using. She's not hurting anybody. I guess these people, though, are arguing that she's killing the babies.
Even though they haven't been conceived.
Abstinence programs are killing unconceived babies too, because they could be conceiving more babies if they weren't abstinent. So, I mean, any way you're attacking it, there's going to be issues. It does trouble me, though, that there are so many people, a 3-to-1 margin, that's still a lot of people who think that they should be taking away other people's God-given rights. And that's very troubling. That's why, Nick, so many tirades of mine talking about how dumb the American people are. It's very important that you fight for your neighbor's rights, even if you don't care about them. Look, you might not care if your neighbor's a pot smoker or a drinker. You might not care about those things. Those things might not bother you, but maybe religious freedoms do, or other things that you take for granted. Someday the government will come after you, the rights that you like to. That's why it's always important to fight for every God-given right. Anyways, we do need to move along here. If you have a different opinion on this, you can send it to us at fmtv@freemindstv.com. But for now, I do want to move on. I wanted to talk about police officers in Idaho and Texas. They are going through some vigorous training programs, and many of them are already on the streets with not only a gun and badge in their hand, but also a syringe. Yes, these police officers are now being trained to forcibly, in some cases, take blood from motorists on the side of the road. And we're not talking about, well, I guess we're talking about drunk driving here. In Idaho and Texas, defense attorneys had advised people who were pulled over for a DWI to refuse a breathalyzer test. Well, this prompted the National Highway and Traffic Safety Administration to undergo some kind of a test program in Idaho and Texas to train officers to take blood forcibly, in some cases, on the side of the road from people suspected of a DWI, not only to use as a deterrent effect, but also to make sure that they can really throw the book at people in court. Now, it should be noted that it is impossible. This is what the Highway Traffic Administration is saying. The reason for this is it's impossible for an officer to hold down a suspect and force them to take a breath test. You have to blow into the tube, and an officer can't force someone to do that. But they say they can force them to lay down on a hood of a car, hold them down while they take blood from a needle. Is this a good idea? Would this put fuzzy feelings inside of you, Nick? What if you're pulled over and you're told to take a breath test? You say no, and then they hold you down and on the side of the road.
The way it works currently is you have a right to refuse a breathalyzer test. Now they'll pull your license anyway if you refuse the test, but you're not forced to blow into the machine. It doesn't seem to me that they should be forcing anybody to give a blood sample.
Well, I'd rather have someone try to force me to blow into a machine than them holding me down on a car and forcibly taking blood from me on the side of a road.
And even under ideal conditions, getting your blood drawn isn't pleasant.
It can be.
It can be.
The veins for it.
But a lot of people don't.
I've donated blood many times, and it's a cinch for me. But I know that there's other people I've seen donating blood in the same room as me, getting poked and poked and poked by trained people under perfect condition. And it's very hard to take some blood samples from certain individuals. It's easy for me, but other people, and especially on the side of a road, maybe it's at night, maybe you're having to hold a kicking and screaming suspect on the hood of a car, and you're supposed to be safely drawing blood from these people? I guess it would be a deterrent effect.
I guess, but it also...
They actually said that, yes, their studies have shown so far that it is a deterrent effect. And that's what's so creepy about this, is the National Highway Traffic Administration says that it will encourage a police nationwide to undergo similar training so that nationwide we can have a program where police officers are routinely taking blood from suspects on the side of the road, in some cases forcibly. Nationwide, Nick. That's why it's important to watch governments on local levels, governments from different countries, governments everywhere, to see what they're doing. Because they've said right from the get-go, if this works, we'll be coming to a hometown near you, your state, your town. Your police officers will be taking blood from your arms. Does that make you feel comfortable? Is it worth it? Some people would say yes. Personally, I say it's a little bit of a violation. I don't think I'd feel comfortable with a police officer taking blood from me. I don't drink and drive. I think it's a horrible idea. Horrible idea, but I think there are definitely better ways.
Well, and they're not necessarily going to be getting people who are drunk behind the wheel. They're going to be asking for blood tests. I mean, as opposed to a breathalyzer, I'm presuming if you say no to a breathalyzer, they might still offer the breathalyzer, and if you say no, then they'll try to get you with this, but they're not necessarily going to be getting guilty people 100% of the time. If they were, then there would be no need to do any kind of testing because they would already know they were guilty.
Well, another main point in this is to make sure that these cases aren't going to trial. Right now they're saying way too many DWI cases are going to trial, so they want an airtight case. So they have the blood evidence right away. They don't have to wait to take the person to the hospital to do it under the correct conditions. They can just do it right there.
They don't want any cases to get. Quite honestly, I'm not surprised, but it's a sad commentary on the American justice system when the government's openly stated public position is that they don't want people to take cases to trial, but they really don't. I mean, you're not. You're not supposed to actually exercise your right to due process.
This probably sounds very, very normal to people saying, "Of course, they wouldn't want these cases to go to trial. That would be crazy. It would jam up the system. You could never get a trial through." But it's actually the reality is. People should have the right to take their cases to trial. We should be making sure that every person is 100% guilty and not just getting off on a plea bargain because they're scared of having the book thrown at them if they take it to trial. We should be encouraging people to take every single case to trial to make sure that they're 100% guilty and not just taking a plea bargain because they're afraid. And that's what a lot of these cases are. People who are 100% innocent are pleading guilty to things to take, well, if you're offering me a year and if I get found guilty, I'm going to be 15 years, well, I'll plead guilty. I mean, it's a sick system that's going on right now. Over 90% of all cases are pleaded before they go to trial. And the fact that these officials here are publicly saying this, and it's not even controversial. It's not even controversial anymore, and it absolutely should be. It should be every single case should go to trial to make sure that 100%, with beyond a shadow of a doubt, this person is not guilty. Plea bargains, very wrong. I mean, different opinions, send them to us. It just makes my skin crawl to think that this is where the American justice system has come to, and the American people are so ready to just take it, lay down and take whatever the man is giving you because... Well, it's what we do now, Nick. We've got to put people behind bars. System tough on crime.
It leads to a system where they make the penalties for a crime much more severe than a lot of people think they should be, so that they can threaten people into pleading out to a crime. I mean, they might say, we're going to give you 20 years for this burglary, but if you plead out, we'll give you 1 to 2.
Yes.
But they're not. The intention isn't to send people to prison for 20 years for a burglary. It's to get people to plead out to a few years' time.
And we wonder why our prisons are overfilling, our jails are fuller than any other country in the entire world, and we barely have any percentage of the population. Yet we have more prisoners than anybody else. And we're the freest country in the world. Anyways, we do need to move on. We can't really do much about this except stand up and fight it where you can, but every once in a while you can at least let these fools who create these rules, know how you feel about it with the Downsizer Dispatch. So let's go to it. Let's do the Downsizer Dispatch. Tell what people can do, at least to let their elected officials know what they can do in Washington. Nick.
This week's Downsizer Dispatch has to do with the Read the Bills Act. This is probably the flagship campaign of downsizedc.org. They've been pushing it for a long time. The idea is that any member of Congress who wants to vote in the affirmative on a piece of legislation and actually give it the force of law, impose the rules in the bill on us, actually has to read the bill or have heard the bill being read by the clerk. So they can vote no if they want to, or they can abstain if they skim it and they see areas where they know they disagree. But how can representatives actually represent you? And it's kind of a fallacy to think they can represent hundreds of thousands of people at one time on one issue. But how can they even pretend to represent you if they're not reading the legislation that they're voting on? And in many cases, they're not reading this legislation at all. They're looking at the title, they're listening to what somebody else is telling them is in the bill, and they're not actually checking the facts whatsoever. But this might be a good time to make a push for the Read the Bills Act because it seems both parties are both using reading the bill as sort of a sign of moral superiority. If they have how well they have read the health care bill, for instance, it seems that both sides are trying to make claims that, well, the Republicans are saying the Democrats haven't read the legislation, and the Democrats are saying the Republicans haven't read the legislation. So it's a good time to make a push with your elected officials in Washington. Let them know that you think they should have to read bills if they're going to pass them into law. You can do that by going to downsizerdc.org and joining up on the Read the Bills campaign.
Nick, it's interesting. I bet both sides, I bet there's very few people on both sides that have read the entirety of the bill. But, that's how things have been for a long time in Washington, D.C. The legislators, the people you elected to represent you, they simply don't care. They don't care to read the bills, at least. They just care about lining their pockets with green and making sure that they scratch their friends' backs, and well, their friends will scratch theirs. Anyways, we do need to take a quick break, but when we come back, we have tons more stories to get to. We're going to be talking about distracted driving in Maine, charging cyclists for driving on the roads, a whole lot more. Stay tuned. This is Free Minds TV. Free Minds TV is brought to you in part by anarchyinyourhead.com, a comic about freedom. When it comes to politics, they hate just about everyone, so they're bound to make fun of someone that you don't like eventually. Anarchyinyourhead.com, that's anarchyinyourhead.com.
Am I on? Am I on?
You're on.
Do I talk now? Do I talk now? I'm Gardner Goldsmith,
She's here.
and
I think she's up by where they're doing the show.
you're watching Free Minds TV. Open your mind, baby. Tell others to do the same.
And welcome back to Free Minds TV. As always, it is Toby here with you.
And Nick.
We'd like to invite you, the viewer, or the listener, I guess this does go out on our audio podcast as well, to log on to our website. freemindsmedia.org is the address. From there, there's not only the archives of the TV show, the archives of the radio show, blog articles, ways to help the show, as well as the member side for only $3 a month or $30 a year. It's not only a way to get tons of bonus material for the show, all the archives of the show, bonus TV and radio shows, but it's also just a great way to support pro-freedom media, because there's not a lot of it out there. There's a lot of big government media, but not a lot of pro-freedom media. So become a member, $3 a month or $30 a year, and actually help us out, help us grow and stay on, get on more stations, and reach more people. All right, we do have a lot of stories to get to, so let's jump right into it. Going over to Maine, we do have a few stations over in Maine, so I thought it was important to bring this article to you, where Maine has now outlawed distracted driving. Now, we all have done it at some point in our lives. If you've ever been behind a wheel at some point, you have been distracted by something, whether it's the bratty kids in the back seat, the cell phone ringing off the hook, adjusting the radio, eating a hamburger, or some people smoking a cigarette. All of these things are distractions while driving. There are things that could be worse, but now all distracted driving in Maine is illegal and comes with it a fine of up to $500. Now, the bill also states that not only the fine is up to $500, but it defines distracted driving as being engaged in an activity not necessary to the operation of the vehicle that impairs or could impair the ability to drive safely. Now, this is very vague language, and what it's doing is essentially outlawing everything from eating a hamburger to smoking a cigarette to talking to the passenger in the seat next to you, to adjusting the radio, to random thoughts. Could those be construed as distracting if you have a thought going through your head? Maybe if you're singing to the radio? These are all distractions. It's very few people you see there 10 into 100%, or maybe it's 9 and 3 now. I forget what my driver's ed teacher told me. Somewhere around there. I know it's always changing as well. But there's very few people who are never taking one of their hands off the wheel, never talking to the passenger next to them. And there are all of us at one point in time have had a French fry, have maybe talked on the cell phone. Not a good idea, but we've all done it. Should you be able to be pulled over and given a $500 fine for it? What do you think, Nick?
Yeah, I think it's overreach. And what they're doing here is essentially they're exercising the principle of prior restraint to say that if something could distract you, then we need to give you a ticket for it because it's a threat to public safety. Well, there are already laws on the books for reckless driving. If somebody is not paying attention, they're going to put a CD into the CD player and they drop it and reach down and
like
swerve.
They swerve, or they're going too quickly, they're weaving around the road. That would be
they go over the double yellow line.
That's where you're putting other people's lives in danger. And I'm not saying that distracted driving is a good idea, but it's almost this catch-all phrase. I mean,
Well,
some
the way
people
the law
might be
is written in
very
this
good
case.
at eating a hamburger while driving.
And
It
almost
could be.
everybody tunes the radio or changes what song is on playing from a CD. So
Or talks to their passengers. That's distracted driving. According to the language of this bill, talking to the person next to you, interacting with the kids in the back seat. These are distractions that take your focus off the road. Now, maybe you're still driving perfectly. You're able to multitask and drive your car while you're dealing with these distractions. But it doesn't matter, because if it could impair your ability to drive, it's distracted driving.
And I want to point out too that for people who do have accidents as a result of distracted driving, well, as I said, there are already some laws on the books to deal with that if you do cause harm to other people, but your insurance rates are going to go up too. I mean, you're going to end up paying more every month if you're having accidents where you're not necessarily hurting anybody, but maybe you're not paying attention when you're backing out. Maybe you're not even necessarily doing anything like eating a hamburger or changing the radio, but maybe you're just not double checking as much as you should be when you back your car out somewhere and you bump into something and you do $400 worth of damage to your fender, then you're going to have to pay higher insurance premiums if you file a claim. So there are all kinds of things, not to mention people aren't completely retarded when they drive, and most people don't want to take suicidal risks. So there are plenty of different factors that already exist to motivate people to pay some attention when they're driving.
I do want to caution you there. The PC police will be honest for using the word retarded, Nick. So be careful. We don't want to mess with the politically correct society. We've gotten emails in the past, so easy there, Nick. But I did want to point out one thing. What about police officers entering license plates into the computer? What about police officers scanning people and doing all their radio checks, talking on the phone? How many times have you seen police officers going down the road playing with their big old computer screen?
Oh, they're running license plates for that a lot of the time.
Oh, yeah. Is that distracted driving? Well, I'm sure this law won't apply to them. Anyways, we do need to move on. We've got lots more stories to get to. Let's talk about the news a little bit. We all know it's biased. I mean, you're watching some kind of a news show, but at least we say right up front, we're very biased. We are a news commentary. We are not bringing you the news. We're bringing you commentary on the news. We're using news stories. We post up all the show content up on our forum, so you know you're watching biased news. But what about the news programs that claim to be unbiased? How unbiased really are they really, and what's the public think, Nick?
Well, according to a new Pew Research Center poll, most of the public, nearly 2/3, 63%, don't believe that the news they are getting is on target, or they believe that it is frequently inaccurate. So whether that's newspaper or TV or radio, almost 2 in 3 people think that the news that they're getting, it isn't really all that factually accurate. And guess what? They're probably right. I mean, if you've ever read a newspaper article about an event where you've been involved, I know that's an interesting experience for people the first time they see a TV episode or a news clip about something they've been involved in personally, and it gets several facts completely wrong or distorts the picture that people are getting. Well, that happens all the time. I mean, frankly, most of the news you're getting is not 100% objective view. They just decided to throw together, some assemblage of video clips and commentary that they think will sell ads in the meantime. I mean, that's really what the news media is there to do. And quite often, they're off base. They're not giving you the facts correctly. Right. They're giving you an inaccurate view.
And it's a huge disservice, because what they're really supposed to do is check the government. They're supposed to be that final check on what the government is doing to make sure that the public, us, the voters, the people who the government's supposed to represent, actually has a firm grasp on what the government is doing. And they're not doing that job. I mean, they're simply not doing it anymore. They're not investigating the stories. They're getting the quick stories that can easily sell ads, as you said, Nick, and they're just not doing their job. And it is a very, very important job too.
And I think it's gotten worse over time. Investigative journalism, it's really not what it used to be. I mean, reporters there used to be sort of more of a culture that they would try to expose the facts, whatever the facts may be, whatever story they're covering, whoever might, not be flattered by the story getting out. There was sort of a culture that they would investigate everything. And there's always been some inaccuracy in newspapers. There's always been bias, whether it's the editor or the reporter. There's always been some bias, but I think it has gotten worse. And back in 1985, a full 55% of Americans said that they did trust their newspapers and television reporters. They believe that they generally got things right. So over half of Americans used to really trust the news media, but now 2/3 of them don't. And I don't blame them. It's not a very objective news media.
Well, more news than ever before, and less news to really look at for the facts. And once again, I do want to say we are news commentating on the news, not reporting to bring you.
We're talking
news.
heads.
Yes, we're talking heads. We are bringing you very biased news. I mean, we're biased towards freedom and liberty and a smaller government. We say that right at the beginning of each show. And if you want to check out the news stories for yourselves, they are up on our forums at freemindsmedia.org. All right, we do have a couple more articles. Not much time to get to them. Let's go over to the land of Scotland, where the government is proposing putting a registration fee on all bicycles. Yes, this coming in the report of the Draft Cycling Action Plan for Scotland, or otherwise known as CAPS. Well, not only are they planning to get 10% of all motor vehicle traffic to go without motors via the pedals, but they're also proposing registration fees or taxing people to use their bicycles on the road. Now, a lot of these taxes are going to fight all the carbon and the CO2 that's being released when you're driving a car or a motor vehicle, and it doesn't really, and also wear and tear on the roads. But now we are going to not only be trying to encourage people to ride their bicycles, but also charging them more taxes for it. Nick, will this work?
Well, it'll probably work to get more tax revenue for the government, but I don't see how these new taxes on cyclists is actually going to help them achieve the goal of getting 10% of motor vehicle traffic to switch to using the bicycle for their mode of transportation. And it appears to me they have conflicting goals here. I mean, on the one hand, the government's trying to push for, we need to get green, we need to get some of these cars off the road, so we need to get a lot more people riding bikes. But hey, if we do that, we're going to lose a lot of our tax revenue. So, and frankly, I doubt it works any differently in Scotland. Even in places where all the road taxes and vehicle taxes are supposed to go to the road, well, it's just a big slush fund. Really, in practice, it gets used for other pet projects that have nothing to do with the road. So, you could argue that, well, if there's less traffic, there's less road repair that needs to be done. Well, that's not really where a lot of that money is going right now. So the government has these two conflicting goals. One is to extract as much money from the people as possible, and the other is to make people ride bicycles instead of driving cars.
Yeah, and a lot of these taxes, they're not only going for the repair of the roads, which bicycles, how much damage does a bicycle really do? I mean, I don't know the exact numbers, Nick, but I think
it has to be substantially less than
a car. And also, how much CO2 is a bicycle actually producing?
I guess you do have to respirate a lot. I mean, there's some
car.
carbon used to make the bike, but then the only CO2 emissions are people riding their bikes and breathing out carbon dioxide.
Well, the thing to remember is if you're not in Scotland, well, if you are in Scotland, fight this because it's not in law yet. And if you are not in Scotland, be careful because there are other governments watching this. And if this works, it will be coming to a government near you, I guarantee. Maybe not next year, maybe not the year after, but sometime soon enough. And soon you'll have to register your bicycle with the government and pay a tax when you register it, just like you do your car. And, it's unfair. Do they do that everywhere? Register the car to get the tax? I guess it's
pretty much everywhere you have to register a car.
Works. Anyways, we're out of time. We do have another story that I guess we'll have to save for the radio show this Sunday, 3 to 5 p.m. Eastern Standard, about Blackwater, a whole lot of abuse that's going on there. Anyways, we'll have to save that for this Sunday's radio show. Anyways, it has been Toby here with you.
And Nick.
Log on to freemindsmedia.org in the meantime.
To the hands of dishonest men, and I'll watch my freedom go as you quietly washed your hands, and the fear inside all that love has died and given way to the power of fear. And I hope